Hey everyone, I'm Eddie Trunk. You know me from That Metal Show. You know me from TV, from radio, and now you're going to know me from Good Company coming up.
Good Company!
Hey guys, my name's Scott Bowling, and you're watching Good Company. Today we have the man, Eddie Trunk. Eddie Trunk has been on radio for 34 years, I believe. First guy to play Metallica. I think first guy to play Anthrax. I could be wrong. At the same time, maybe.
It's all a blur.
He also he has That Metal Show, and he has a podcast. He has 2 channels on Sirius with Trunk Nation and Hair Nation. Also, he has Trunk Fest, which we're definitely going to talk about. So, thank you for being here, brother.
Scott, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Great space. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. How's Trunk Fest going?
It's going good. You know, it's a bit of a different thing for me. It's more of a travel show, actually, than anything. People have seen it on Access TV, and it's been a blast to do. I shot 7 so far for the first season, and I'm literally leaving here with you and ending up tonight in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I'm going to be shooting the 8th and final episode of season 1 this weekend at something called Frontier Days, which is kind of I think a rodeo meets like nice. Music, but the network picks the festivals, and the criteria for the festivals we cover, they want it to be more about the experience and what goes on around the festival versus who's playing it and what the theme of the music is. It's more about the food, the attractions and things like that. So it's been a blast to do. I'm having a great time doing it. It's a great crew. I'm going to be doing more, I found out, which is great. They're going to be doing some more seasons of it. So it's been fun, and what I like the most about it is it's taking me out of my wheelhouse. I can sit and talk to artists forever. I've done that my whole life. As you said, this is my 35th year actually doing that, radio, TV, what have you, which is great. But this is some different things. This is me sort of getting out there and trying things and getting out of my comfort zone. So it's been fun.
Whose idea was it to do a show about festivals? You know, that seems pretty unique. Was that your idea? Was Access TV?
It was the network. You know, I had been talking to Access TV for a while about trying to do something with them. All the years that I was doing That Metal Show, and then before That Metal Show, I was a host at the network, the same network, VH1 Classic. So I had my wagon hitched to VH1 Classic for, like 13 years or something like that. When you factor in the work I did before That Metal Show, which some people saw, some didn't because the channel wasn't as big, but I was a host there for 5 years doing all kinds of interviews and all kinds of like VJ stuff. And that's how That Metal Show came about. So, but I was under contract and very much tied to them for a long time. And then when the VH1 Classic unfortunately went away and the whole thing went away a few years ago, that's when the opportunities opened up a little bit more that I could talk to Access TV. So I was talking to them about doing some stuff. I had done a few things. I did some concert coverage for them once. I did a red carpet for them once.
Did you do a reel-to-reel?
Yes.
Was that them?
Yeah. They did, a series of documentary films. I just did host raps for them. So I had some dealings with them and certainly knew them. And of course, when That Metal Show ended, I talked to them about That Metal Show. And it was the world came to me, you know, in terms of the fans, like, you know, go to Access TV because it would made the most sense because it's a music channel. But clearly they weren't interested in doing it for a variety of reasons at this time. But we had a great dialogue, and then they came to me and they said, you know, there's more. We got this idea. There's so many music festivals now. We want to cover them. Do you want to do this? And we had lunch. They laid it out to me. And unlike That Metal Show where I had to fight and kick and scream and develop it and pull different people in, and that was really my baby. This was a thing where they just said, we got this idea, here's the producer, we want you to host it, do you want to do it? And in that regard, it was a walk in the park compared to the push-pull every step of the way of the development of That Metal Show. To be able to just call in and say, hey, we want you to come in and host it, and that's it. So it's been great. I mean, and now obviously I have some input on the things I will and won't do in Trunk Fest and things that they, you know, I'll throw some ideas out there, but it's very much their thing, and I'm there to host it. And obviously, because it's about me experiencing these things, it's a lot about me. They came up with the name, not me. They wanted to call it Trunk Fest, so they wanted to brand it with me and make it like seeing things through my eyes for the first time, which is a lot of it is. But the whole idea of it and everything was all theirs. They just came to me with it.
That's great. You have a family, right? You got one kid?
I have 2 kids. I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, and my wife. Yeah.
So how do you do when you do something like Trunk Fest? How do you balance family and Sirius XM 2 channels? I mean, is that mobile? Can you do shows?
Yeah, I mean, family. The family thing is tricky because as I just bought a very small little house at the beach for the summer, a little summer house, and this is the first year I own it, and my wife and I had talked about buying it, and I said to her, I go, if I buy that, I may not be there too much because I'm going to be running around the country paying for that. You have it, the kids have it, my dad can go there, and I'll get there when I can get there. But you got to. So it's kind of like, it's a fine balance. I mean, when I'm home, I'm home, and when I'm on the road, I'm on the road. And in the last 3 to 4 years, I've probably been on the road more than I've ever been in my life. That being said, it's nothing compared to like what a touring rock band does. Right. Touring rock band goes on the road. I've got friends. One of my good friends is Mike Portnoy. I mean, guy's got a beautiful house. He's maybe there 2 weeks a year. It seems like, right. He's literally out constantly on the road. Nothing like that. But it can be a week on, a week off. It can be a long weekend and then back. So it's a lot of running back and forth. But it's fine. We make it all work. And the way I look at it is I'm lucky that I have all the opportunities that I have. And that's an extension of my family too, because obviously, as well as anyone, you have kids, you have family. There's a lot of overhead. There's a lot, and that's on me. So I'm lucky in that all the things I do are things that I love, but they're also the things that keep the whole thing afloat and pay the bills. So I've been able to find a way to make my passions also my career, and it's a bit of a balancing act, but it all works out in the end. Great. And as far as the radio show, it'll be 2 years in October that I've been doing a daily show on Sirius XM, and it's live. And that was a bit of a concern when they came to me about doing that, because I do enjoy doing the work on the road. I do a ton of hosting. I do a variety of different things, and I love getting out there and meeting different people that like what I do, or getting opportunities to interview them and such. And I said to SiriusXM, I said, I really don't want to give up doing that. There's some things that I love doing, and I don't want to have to pull off of the road because there's a lot of great opportunities for me there. And they were cool about it, and because of technology, there's a unit that's about this big, and as long as I can get an internet line that I can plug into, I can do a radio show. And you would never know where it's coming from. It could be, I've done it from cruise ships, I've done it from hotel rooms, I've done it in my underwear in the basement.
The problem with that is, like, if you ever call in sick, there's hey, just plug that cord in. And
well, if you can't talk, do a radio. Yes. But otherwise, I've done shows sick, I've done shows in every way possible, and I've got like a little box that I carry with me, and it used to have to have a special line and all this stuff. Now, as long as you get a decent internet, plug it in, and you can do it from anywhere. So it's been great.
That's awesome. Going back to when you first started, you did the pirate radio with your buddy, right? I love that story. You kind of did it on the weekends. Is that how you kind of had this passion for being on the radio, and is that where it all started from?
My passion for the radio, being on the radio, was my passion for all the things I do and have done is really driven by one thing. It's driven by the fact that I love rock music, and when I was in high school and I was a kid, I was made fun of for liking it. I was marginalized, I was laughed at, I was the outcast because of it, the bands that I liked. And I hated that, and I was just like, man, I'm gonna find a way to promote these bands and share this music I like with other people and find a voice to be able to tell them it is cool. So that was the driver and has been on everything my whole career. And when I was in high school, we had my hometown in New Jersey has 3 colleges in it, which is weird because it doesn't feel like a college town, but it is in the sense that it's got 3 major colleges. And one year when we were seniors, the college, Drew University, came to us and they said, over the summer, we want to keep the radio station on while the college students go home. Do you want to send some seniors over to learn radio? So I was already writing the music column in the high school newspaper. So I'm like, yeah, I'm in. it didn't last because we quickly found out it was a great place to party on the weekends. You know, they shut the whole thing down after like 2 shows. But we got enough of an interest. It piqued my interest in like, it wasn't like, wow, I can do radio and people are going to hear me and know my name and know me. It was, wow, I can take this record that I love and maybe instead of me just hearing it, maybe 10 or 20 more people are going to be able to hear it. And I can tell them how great it is. That's what it was about. That's all my thought was. And that's what like got my interest a little bit in radio. And then what happened was I was working in a record store. Again, another way I could share music with people. I could sell it to them. Mm-hmm. And the manager of the record store, who was very much into radio, but for a completely different reason than me. He was into radio for what radio was, like the big voice and the reverb and like, you know, talking right up to the post and like, hey, well, that never appealed to me. But he was into that end of radio. And he said to me one day, I told him about the experience of going to the College Station, and he knew I was already into hard rock and stuff. And he said, I told him I had this interest in radio because of it. And he said to me, he goes, come to my house this weekend on Sunday or whatever in Staten Island. I was like, okay. I mean, I was like 18 at the time. And I was like, I don't know what we were doing or what he... And I went to his house. We went down in the basement, and he had this, I'll never forget it, like a table, and there was a bed sheet or something thrown over it, and he pulls the bed sheet up, and there's like a little radio console. And I was like, what's this? And it was basically what is a pirate radio station. And for people that don't know what that is, if you broadcast over the air illegally, you don't have an FCC license or whatever, it's illegal to do. So he had this transmitter and equipment, and he would turn the thing on the weekends, not for a long period of time because you don't want to get flagged. They could probably trace it. And we would do these like pirate radio shows in his basement. And he would be playing like top 40 and like, you know, and a ton of reverb on the mic. And I would come on and I would be like playing, I don't know, like an old Billy Squier record or something. And again, this is way before cell phones or computers. So we would give out the request line, which would actually be the payphone down the street by the pizza place. We'd put a guy there, he'd answer the payphone. He'd take the answer the payphone saying, you know, hi, what's I, you know, the radio station. Like he was calling, and then he'd write it down, he'd hang up. Then he'd call back to the house, because we want to give out the house number, and say, okay, play, you know, this for Johnny. And it's made it sound like we were doing a show. It was fun. It didn't last long. And then really that's how I made my first demo tape.
So do you still have any of this material?
I do have that demo tape.
Oh, would you ever?
I gotta find it. It's the thing I remember about it is it's on open reel. So I hope that it hasn't deteriorated. Much like albums that are recorded on open reel, which they were, you can restore the tape even if it has. I have to look at it, but I know it's an open reel, and I don't remember. I'd love, you know, maybe I'd probably be petrified to hear it again, but I do remember it just had a lot of effect on it. It was very reverby, and it was just enough to show that I could kind of do it.
Can you talk about meeting Johnny Z and that relationship? Didn't he just kind of knock on your door one day?
Yeah, literally. Well, I knew John because he was from New Jersey like me. He had a flea market. He had a record store and a flea market called Rock and Roll Heaven. I would always drive there on weekends. I would get my Kerrang magazine. I would get my picture discs. I would get all my imports, and I would buy it. I was just a customer. And then when I started doing that demo tape that I made led to what was my first, what a lot of people think is one of the first ever metal shows on radio, which was launched in '83. So that show still continues to this day that I do in an extension of that show. But when I went on the air with that show, doing a metal show, it made a lot of noise because literally, especially on the East Coast, nobody was. Mm-hmm. There was another guy in Long Island who's a friend. His name is Fingers. He and I around the same time started doing metal shows, but he was on a station in Long Island. I was in New Jersey. And it just made a big noise that there was somebody doing a radio show focused on metal. And when I would go buy these imports from John, and then all of a sudden now I had a way to play them, and other people could hear them. Mm-hmm. So I would put them on the radio. I'd play like Man of War or Raven or all this stuff he was selling me at that time. And other people were hearing it. So when I went in the next week, John would tell me that there would be a spike because people were listening to my show, hearing about it, and going to buy it. So suddenly John started giving me the records because he knew that it would make him sell more. If he gave one away, he'd sell 10 more. Mm-hmm. So one day, that legendary story is that one day I was maybe 6 months into doing a radio show for the first time, and we were, the radio station was in a house. It was very easy to find in Jersey, and he came to the door, literally knocked on the door in the middle of my shift. And I opened the door and I'm like, what's the guy from the flea market doing here, Mm-hmm. And he's like, I got to talk to you. I'm like, I'm in the middle of doing a show. I was new to radio. I'm still nervous being on the air. And I was like, this isn't a good time. He's just like, I got to talk to you. He had a bag under his arm with the record. John, what's up? And again, this is the day. This is before computers, so I'm playing vinyl and you on the radio, and you have to cue it up, and you have to be on your game. You can't now you can just walk away for 20 minutes because everything's on a computer. And I was like freaking out, and I was just like, John, I got to do this. What is it? And he's like, I need somebody to play this band. I was like, what band? Just leave the record. I'll listen to it. And he goes, I got to know somebody played this on the radio. I was like, what is it? He pulled it out. It was Kill 'Em All.
Wow.
Or it might have been a 12-inch single for Jump in the Fire. I think it might have been that, but he had Kill 'Em All with him.
So it was after No Life to Leather.
Yeah. It was the Megaforce Records vinyl of Kill 'Em All with a 12-inch single of Jump in the Fire, which was like an import or something. He goes, I brought these for you. He goes, just play. He goes, just play it for me. I go, I'm not playing it before I hear it. He's like, no, I won't leave until you play it. You got to play it. I was like, oh man. So I was just at this point, I just want the guy to go away. So I did. I'm pretty sure I played probably Hit the Lights. I probably just played the first track. And I don't know what I heard. Like, I would love to say, I heard the future, I didn't know what I was hearing. At that point, all I knew was Kiss and Aerosmith. I was like, what the hell is this? Is insane. And he said to me, he wrote, and I still have this, I just found it. He wrote on the cover of the album, Ed, you were the first, thank you, John Z. And he left it for me, he left. And when he left, he said to me, if I can ever get this band to break, he said, I'm going to hire you to work for my record company. Yeah, go ahead. Right. That band's going to break. Yeah, right.
Right.
And then he leaves, and 3 years later, obviously Metallica is blown up at this point, or starting to, and he calls me up and he says, hey, so I got good news and bad news. I said, what's that? He goes, the good news is obviously Metallica blew up, and because of it I can start a record company, and I'm going to hire you like I said. I was like, wow, okay. He says, so what's the bad news? He goes, the bad news is you won't be working with Metallica because they're leaving me to go to Elektra, and that's how I'm getting the money to start the record company. All right, well, let's go. And that was it.
When you played Metallica, what kind of response did you get? People at that time calling in going, what was that? Or
I don't really remember. We weren't very phone intensive back then. I mean, the phone calls then were basically just like, play Wasp, play Armored Saint, play Kiss, play, whatever it was, Deep Purple, Iron Maiden, Priest. That's all it really was. People just calling. It wasn't like the radio I do now, where it's very interactive. People have a voice and you go back and forth. And again, remember, there was no texting, there was no computers, there was no emailing, there was nothing. It was just, there were like 2 little request lines. So I didn't really do much interaction stuff with it. I don't remember the audience one way or the other.
So you worked with Johnny Z after that. I wish there was some kind of like documentary about him. Like, it seems like I wish we could know more about him.
Interestingly enough, he literally called me yesterday, which I haven't heard from him in ages. I haven't had a chance to call him back, but I don't know what he's got going on. But he's always got something going on. But yeah, he's a very interesting guy. Him and his wife owned the company. His wife Marcia was very involved as well. And when I got there, man, the thing I'll never forget is like, I got the record company job. Wow, I'm going to be working in this great office and everything. And he gave me the address to report for work the first day, and I said, okay, this is gonna be great. I pull up, and it's somebody's house. It's a little house. And I was like, I guess we're having coffee before we go to the office. My office was literally a phone extension on the carpet next to his kid's crib, and he worked in the garage. I mean, that's what it was. That's how we started. Yeah.
And how long did you work with them for?
Started in 86, left in 90, so about 3.5 years maybe.
Is that when did you work with White Lion? Was that
After.
After, okay.
Right. Because what had happened was, in a nutshell, what happened with Megaforce is I rose up the ladder pretty quickly, but I had to because I was like the second ever employee. The only other person that was there before me was a woman who's still in the business named Maria Ferrero, who was, I think, kind of watching their kids at the time, but also was the publicist for the company. And then and then I came in, and then we both kind of, we brought it more, obviously over those years, some other people came in, some of which I actually got jobs for. And I signed a couple bands. The first act I ever signed and worked on in that capacity was Ace Frehley. Haven't been a big Kiss fan. Yeah. I was always about trying to broaden the company out. The company's very much known for like very heavy metal, Anthrax, Overkill, Metallica, Manowar. I was like, let's get something that maybe could go to the hard rock fans too. So I went out and with John, we tracked down Ace and did 3 records and an EP with Ace in the time that I was there. And then I signed a couple things that tanked. I signed a band from New Jersey called Prophet, which was a melodic hard rock band that I loved, but it tanked.
Did you guys sign King's X?
King's X, Icon is something I signed from Arizona that tanked. King's X, Johnny got that tape. And I'll never forget that day that tape came in the office because they sent a video. It was a VHS tape of them playing a couple songs. And we both looked at it. John brought it into me and he's like, what do you think of this? And we both agreed it was amazing. But I do remember saying to John, I was like, I think we're going to have a tough time selling it. Because you got to remember what was happening at that time. Everybody was pretty and done up, and here you got a guy.
Is this like late 80s kind
of? Yeah, this was mid 80s, like 86, 87.
Living Colour? Because I always think of them being that kind of rock style.
Yeah, but even Living Colour was colorful. Even though they probably regret it, like today, but Corey wearing the diver suit or whatever. I mean, at least they had some. I mean, and King's X had a look. Don't get me wrong, but it was about. King's X is such an amazing band, but what people are amazed about to this day with them, they never had a gold record. They're so loved and revered by the fans that they have and by other musicians, but the commercial success never followed.
Yeah.
We fought like hell to try to get them to break, and we did okay. But we used to say if promos giving away records counted for sales, they would have been platinum because every band would call for copies of the records because the other bands loved them. Critics loved them. We just couldn't get it to cross over. And I think that their sound was something that a lot of people struggled with because it wasn't overly commercial, but it was hooky. They had different tuning. It was a little different sound. And obviously the look wasn't, they weren't pretty like the bands of that day. So it was a tough sell. But they're still going today, and I love those guys. But I do remember that tape coming in. I said to Johnny, I don't know how. See, we had a hard time getting stuff on the radio.
Yeah.
So that's why Ace, we got to a certain point, King's X to a certain point, Prophet tanked because that would totally needed radio, and we couldn't do that.
Was Anthrax on there too?
Yeah, and Anthrax was with us, Testament, Overkill. One of the first things I ever did at Megaforce, and if you have the Megaforce issues of either Metallica, Kill 'Em All, Anthrax, Fistful of Metal, or Overkill, Feel the Fire, there's a credit on the back that says CD Preparation, Ed Trunk. The first thing I ever did was that's when CDs had just started, and get those masters and get them transferred over and put them out on CD. Cool. So that was, I did a lot of cool stuff in the time that I was there, but what happened to the company was John started a management company. He managed Anthrax, he managed Ministry, he managed a band called Mindfunk that was on Columbia. So he started doing a lot, he went way into the management world, and he left the label thing at the time sort of on my lap, which was fine, but the problem was at that point we were distributed by Atlantic, and I didn't have the history in the business to really be able to strong arm Atlantic into doing stuff. I was 22 years old.
Are you guys still operating out of a house?
Yeah, but a bigger house.
Okay.
No, we actually moved to an office. It was funny. We were in an office where there was like a dentist next to us and a gynecologist on the other side. And here we are in the middle, like playing Overkill. It was crazy.
Was your family supportive at the time? I mean, because you're just saying, hey, I'm working for this guy in this house by the crib.
Yeah, I mean, it was like... I've lived in New Jersey my whole life, so I was just thrilled I didn't have to go into Manhattan, because that's just a nightmare when you got to go in and out of the city. So it was still in Jersey, but it was like an hour ride from me away from where his house then office was. But no, my parents were cool about it. I was horrible in school, not because I'm dumb, but I just only cared about music. So when I never went to college. I mean, I went to a county college for a couple months, but my parents were like, look, if you go and stick it out and do well, we'll help you out paying for it. But if you bail or don't go, that's on you and you figure it out. And that's what I ended up doing. I mean, I went to a county college for like 6 months, didn't show up half the time. I wasn't into it. My whole focus was like, what am I going to do in music? And then I got a job working in that record store, and that was like, I worked in a record store for over 10 years on and off.
Really?
Yeah, and that was like the ultimate job at the time. So once I got the job in the record store, I'm like, no, this is what I'm doing. I mean, I'm going down this path. And there was, Zach Wilde always says to me, he's like, Father Trunk, if you didn't figure out a way to do this, what you do, you'd be homeless, right? And I was like, yeah, you're right, I would be, because it was all I cared about. But they were cool with it, and I still think, to some degree, after 35 years, they're still trying to quite figure out what I do. Because
that's cool.
There's this thought that if you don't wake up at 9 and get home at 5 and you don't put a suit on, you're not really working, but I'm doing okay.
So, okay, let's go into the 90s when the whole grunge scene, and what did you do then? Is that when you kind of connected with VH1? And, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like everything, the music industry took that hit when the whole grunge thing dropped. When Megaforce ended, I wanted, one of the acts I wanted Megaforce to sign was White Lion. See, I was getting a lot of stuff come to me, because I lived two worlds. Like, I lived the label guy for a while, and then I lived on the radio. But I always kept them separate. And on the radio, and all my friends always called me Eddie, so I used Eddie on the radio. But in the business, I was just Ed Trunk. Not that people didn't realize it was the same person, but it just was like a little different. Because I was getting stuff coming to me, like I was getting record labels pushing me to play records on one end or for new bands. And then on the other end, I was actually a guy in a position to be able to sign a band. So I was like kind of wearing...
Two different ends.
Yeah, and when the label, what ended up happening with Megaforce is we just didn't see eye to eye anymore, and we kind of amicably parted ways.
I love the story, if you could tell for a second, when Johnny Z fired you.
I had my wisdom teeth out.
I love that story.
Yeah, I mean...
Are you firing me?
we were going down I could feel we were separating. He had brought in some new people to the company, and they were going in one direction, I was going in another. I was very frustrated that he wasn't more hands-on trying to push the records we were putting out, because he was in his management bubble at that time. And I could feel that the end was probably near, but I had all 4 wisdom teeth out, and I was recovering, and it can be very painful for people that don't know. And I have all gauze in my mouth, and and I have ice chips and everything. And I was living at home still at the time, and my mom's like, "John's on the phone." I was like, and he's just like, "So Ed, I think we should talk." And I'm like, "No." And he's just like, "Well, And then I just started I just cut to the chase. I'm like, "Are you calling for me?" And he's like, "Well, by the way," I go, "It's fine. When I'm better, I'll come in and I'll get my shit." And that was it. And then like a week later, I went in, I got all my stuff in a box, shook his hand, said thank you, and that was it. So yeah, that would have been around 90, late 90, 1990, somewhere around then. And then one of the bands I wanted to sign during my time there was White Lion. And he didn't want to do it. And I understand it. It was a different thing. And again, we already proved we couldn't get radio. Mm-hmm. But White Lion signed to our distributor, which was Atlantic. And we didn't have any gold or platinum records, but I did, because White Lion went gold and platinum and sent me their records.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
You can imagine putting that record up on my wall at Megaforce is a little bit of a reminder. Like, you could have...
they had smartphones back then. You could have stood a picture.
I still have the records. I mean, White Lion gave me the record on stage at a show, actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was just like, so what happened was their managers contacted me and said, "Hey, why don't you come work with us?" So I did. So I worked for them for only like a year, though. And it was a company called Loud and Proud Management. They managed White Lion, Overkill, Taiketo, Tora Tora, a guitar player named Eric Gales. We had a singer named Mitch Malloy who just joined Great White like a week ago. And we had 6 acts on 6 different major labels. And they were based in Brooklyn. Hated going to Brooklyn because, again, going to New York from New Jersey just sucks. But I did it, and it was fun. But that's when I started to think, I'm going to keep working at the record store, and I'm going to really chase the radio thing a little bit more. So that's when my whole shift went away from trying to be the behind-the-scenes guy to be like, because I was still doing radio once a week, and I was doing fill-in work and regular DJ stuff.
What station was that, by the way?
DHA.
Okay.
The station I grew up listening to in New Jersey, still there, still a rock station, WDHA. It was the station I grew up with. It was the station that is still a rock station to this day, and it is it's based in the Morris County, New Jersey market. It was my backyard radio station. So I was there from 83 to 94, and then that's when I went into New York. Nice. I broke into New York radio. But it's just, I went to DHA and I was just like, look, I'm available more. I can do more stuff if you want. So I didn't have a full-time shift, but I would get a lot more fill-ins, work at the record store, just see where that took me.
I kind of want to fast forward a little bit. When you were doing that metal show, how did that start?
Well, what happened was I was doing at this point in the 90s all these different things. One of the things that I never did is I never deviated from, like, in other words, when the whole grunge thing hit, I accepted some of that stuff and liked some of it, but I also never stopped loving and supporting all the stuff that came before. I never understood, like, when grunge hit, for people young enough to have, or old enough, I should say, to have lived through that, it was like instant, like, from that point forward, everything that came before was instantly uncool. It was just like Nirvana forward, that's all we care about. And I was never about that. I was just like, I was fine with, like, hey, come on the radio, Skid Row. Come on the radio, Scorpions. Come on, whatever. My doors are still open to you guys. A lot of those doors were closed to people. Yeah, I hated that sort of, I was not going to play that game. So whether it was like one week I'm talking to the Nixons, who were part of this, I just remember they came to my mind because we played the hell out of that record, or whatever emerging grunge there was, I was open to all that, and I was still open door to the other guys.
I love that control you have. If you want to play this, you can. But it seems like a lot of...
Well, that's not an easy thing to do. That to me, that's one of the things that I'm really proud of having fought for, and from the get-go. Because you see, like I said earlier, for me, it wasn't about me being on the radio or my voice or me being known. It was about being able to share music with other people. So when I first got into radio and they said to me, okay, here's the playlist. I was like, what? We don't get to play what we want? What's the point? Right. And they're like, no, you got to follow. I mean, it's amazing to me how many people to this day don't know that if you listen to radio, 99% of radio you listen to that plays music, the person on the radio has nothing to do with what they're playing. A lot of people still don't realize that. And I was just like, it was jarring to me. I'm like, what's the whole point? So that's when the idea of developing my own show happened. And it was a really important thing for me to have done, because there's been rare occasions where I've done what they call the format, which is the playlist and whatever I have to do. But for the most part, I carved my own niche, I carved my own name, and that's so unbelievably important, especially now more than ever, when we're in a world where literally anyone can do radio, anyone can do a podcast, anyone can do anything. To have something you're known for and to have built that over the decades is invaluable. So it wasn't always easy, because you're always going to get the shitty shifts, you're always going to get the late night hours, you're always going to get maybe one time a week, you're always going to kind of be marginalized. But to me, anything was worth it to be able to go in there with a bunch of records over my shoulder and say, here's what I'm playing today. And nobody else could do that. There are very few people that were able to do that.
Wow, that's great. So how did you go?
Oh, that metal show.
Yeah, the metal show. Yeah.
So I kept doing all this radio stuff. A huge moment for me came in '93 when I broke in. 92, I think it was. I broke into New York City radio. Mileage-wise, it's 34 miles from where I lived. But broadcast-wise, it's another universe because you go from broadcasting to a county or a few counties in New Jersey, medium-sized, great radio station, but medium-sized reach, to suddenly broadcasting to 3 states. Again, remember, this is way before streaming. Now you can tap in anybody's stream. We're talking broadcast. And I got on the radio in New York, and I started to just really expand the reach. And I got a call one day. I had always felt I could do TV. I'm never overly confident about a lot of things, but I just knew if I had the opportunity, I could do it. I don't know. I just felt like it was a comfort zone for me that I could do it. And I was walking in to do a radio shift at a station called, it was WNEW. And they said, we have this channel called VH1 Classic. Would you be interested in auditioning? We're looking for VJs. And this would have been around 2001 maybe. And I said, yeah, I had not heard of the channel. I didn't get it. I didn't know anything about it. But the guy who called me, a guy named Rick Krim, who was always a huge, huge ally of mine and always been grateful to him for opportunities. He's kept his eye open for me. And Rick said, well, here's the information, go to the audition. And I went to the audition process like, God, 6 months of auditions.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was not easy. It was not, talk about scripted. It was literally like they'd give you a stack of scripts like this high, and you had to memorize them and spit them out, no teleprompter, verbatim.
And you've never done anything like this before, so it's all...
But I mean, so I would spend, I'd get a FedEx envelope that would drop on my desk on a Saturday, and I'd either have to shoot on Monday or Tuesday, and I would have to memorize scripts like that high.
Really?
Yeah, it was brutal. And
why is that? Why can't they just have you read it? You know?
First of all, there was this mentality at the time that that if you worked off prompter that you would look like you were reading, which is ridiculous, but there was that. And honestly, the budget was so small that they didn't want to pay a prompter person. So I worked my ass off on those auditions, and then finally they said, okay, you got the gig. And it was me and one or two other hosts, and we were the VJs for the early years of VH1 Classic, and watch the channel grow and get bigger. And we would intro videos, every genre of music, and I would do artist interviews, and I do my gosh, I did so many huge artist interviews. I went to England twice with Robert Plant. I went to Birmingham with Sabbath. I mean, I did amazing stuff pre that metal show. We had live performances. We had all this stuff that not a lot of people saw, because every time it would go up online when the internet rose up, they would pull it down for whatever reason, Viacom who owned it, and the channel wasn't as popular. But I loved having the gig, even though it was agonizing memorizing those scripts, because even when I got the gig, I still had to do that.
Jeez.
For years I did it. It destroyed my weekends. It was just like...
How many times did you have to read it? Just you'd spend your whole weekends?
Oh gosh, I'd have to just go through it, and I'd have to run through it, and then I'd have to walk away and pretend to do it, like to the wall to see if I got it down, and then I'd use these trigger words. I mean, it was terrible. And I would say to them, I'm going, can't you see my head exploding trying to remember? Right. If you just put up a prompter, it would be so much more relaxed. It was a big push-pull for a long time.
It almost takes away from the experience.
Oh, it was brutal. It was brutal. I get weird just thinking about how every time that they dropped the FedEx, I would be like, how thick is it this week? Oh. But I did it because, look, let's be honest, I ain't Brad Pitt, who's putting a guy like me looking at TV, it's just like, I just do my thing. But I had to sell my ability, I had to sell the intangibles I brought, because it wasn't like I was some model looking dude up there that was just playing off of that. I had to play off of what I could do and how hard I worked and prove that. So I did it, and I did it. But what killed me about it, Scott, was that it was so scripted. It was like, I will never forget this one. I introduced a Mariah Carey video, and I was just like, so check out Dream Lover by Mariah Carey. And my producer walked in, he goes, no, do that one again. I said, why? He goes, look at the script. It says, enjoy Dream Lover, not check out.
Oh.
And I was just like, are you kidding me? and we redid it to Enjoy. And I was just like, and it made me nuts. So I would always be in their ear. And as much as it was fun to do, I would be like, guys, you're dropping the ball here. Like, let me be me. If I had an artist interview, they would give me the questions. Here's what you can and can't ask. I was, turn me loose. Let me be me. No. And then the whole channel got blown up in 2006, meaning they killed all the staff. They fired everyone, hosts, executives, everyone, for VH1 Classic. And they just put it on autopilot and started just running old videos. And that's when, again, my friend Rick, who was working there, I was pushing like crazy for him to do, for me to do a show, a metal show, a rock show, my own show. And that's when he called me and he said, why don't you come in and let's talk about this idea you always wanted to do? Because that whole other regime had been moved out. And now the channel, there's literally like nobody there. It was just being babysat by regular VH1. And that starts the whole process of that metal show. And that's really how it was born. I got in there and I started pushing, and there were a lot of different people attached. Something a lot of people don't know is the show originally was me and Jim Brewer, the comedian Jim Brewer. It was originally going to be he and I doing it. And then very close to us getting ready to do it, he decided he didn't want to do it. And he walked away from it. And then it took me a year to put it back together.
How'd you find Jim and Don?
Don and Jim had been listeners of my radio show.
Okay. And
they are stand-up comics for a living. And they came up to me, my recollection is we're all from New Jersey. They came up to me at an Ozfest. And they introduced themselves. They said, hey man, we listen to your show on the weekend when we get out of our comedy gigs. We love it. I was like, cool. And I don't know, I just felt an immediate connection to them, even though I had just met them for the first time. I was just like, hey guys, take my number. I said, if you ever are in New York and you want to come hang out on the radio show, let me know. And they did. And they did many times. So they were like regulars on my radio show, just sitting in with me whenever they were around.
Oh, that's cool.
And then when Brewer decided he didn't want to do it, I went to the network and I'm like, listen, I've got these other two friends, because we had already been friends. So a lot of people don't realize that either. It's like, Don and Jim and I, we were friends before that metal show. We weren't like put together. I brought them in. And I said, guys, let's go up there. Let's have a meeting. Let's prove to them we've got a chemistry, the three of us, and we can still make this work. Because VH1 did not want to do the show once Brewer left.
Oh, they didn't? Yeah.
No. They were like, no. And I literally, Scott, for a year, had to pound on them to give me one opportunity to make it work with the two other guys. Because they didn't know who Don and Jim were. They knew who Brewer was. And they're just like, we don't feel like it's not Brewer. I was like, this can work. They already do my radio show. There's chemistry here. It's going to be fun. It'll be different, but it'll be fun. And I finally got them, VH1, to agree to a meeting. Don and Jim came in there with me, and they let us shoot the pilot, and that's the way we went.
That's great.
Yeah.
So actually, we're talking about that metal show. I actually have some questions here. If you want to do like a quick Stump the Trunk.
Uh-oh.
So I have, on this card right here, I have Clint Lowry sent a question in.
All right.
And Rich Ward sent a question in.
All right.
So Clint Lowry is all about this, by the way.
Everybody is. No, you don't know what it's like. You 35 years in the business, and the biggest thing is people love to challenge you. I'm going to get you, Trunk. But it's all good, man.
I like when you said you're at the doctor's office and you're about to go under, and they're like,
"Can we ask you a question real quick?" Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's great people have so much fun with this.
Okay, here it is. What year did Mark St. John play with Kiss, and what condition caused him to leave the band?
Well, I'm terrible with years, but I'm pretty sure that would have been 84.
Yep.
Animalize album.
Right, yep.
And the condition he had was, I believe, called Writer's Syndrome.
Yeah, I read arthritis. Yeah.
An arthritic condition in his hand, yeah.
That's right.
All right. 1 for 1. Kicking ass in Atlanta.
Rich Ward of Fozzy Stuck Mojo, he did this one. How about, who played bass guitar on Stryper's Earth, Wind & Fire covering Shining Star?
Was it Randy Jackson?
Yes.
Oof, 2 for 2. Taking you down, Rich and Clint. I got you. I thought Rich was going to come with a John Sykes question because that's our bond. He and I are big John Sykes fans. But
okay, and then now going from here, talking about these two. You have 2 books, and you're about to do another book, right? About your life.
I stalled hard at the halfway point, but yeah, I've got a. These books are stories mostly about the bands and my experiences with them. Yeah, that was the first one that did really well.
I love the Baz Sebastian Bach story.
Oh God!
Can you share that for a second? That's one of my favorite stories.
God, that's so classic, Sebastian. All right, so there's a very well documented story when Axl Rose walked into my radio show, and Sebastian was there that night. He was the catalyst for it happening, because Axl started texting him. They hadn't talked in like 13 years. And Sebastian was there, Scott Ian was there, Chris Jericho was there, and all these guys just hanging out in my studio. They were promoting a TV show. And Sebastian kept, texting me. He's like, dude, Axl Rose is down the street. I was like, yeah. And then, long story short, Axl comes in, and it was a huge moment. It was the first interview he had done with anybody about anything in over 10 years. And he physically was there with us. And it made Rolling Stone, it made the news. We went out afterwards. It was like a huge deal at the time. And it's something I'm asked about still all the time. And everybody who has written a book has written about the story, because Jericho wrote about it in his book, and Scott wrote about it in his book, I believe. So most of the people that were there that night have written books and talked about it happening on my radio show. Well, Sebastian was the reason it happened, because Axl was texting him that night. So here comes Baz's book, and I'm like, and I've literally known Sebastian 30 years. He's a friend, as all the guys in Skid Row are and were. So I'm like, I can't wait to see Baz, because everybody had a little bit of a different take on the story, by the way.
But it's on YouTube, so you can hear the proof of it. I listened to this whole interview.
Oh, okay. So I'm reading Sebastian's book, and when he gets to the story, he glosses. He just says in the thing, he goes, and the radio guy was astonished or something. He just wrote the radio guy was. I'm like, he's just calling me like some radio guy, like. It was on my show that I invited him on to promote his stuff that Axl Rose walked into. It all, like, I've known this guy 30 years, like, radio guy. Like, I was just at a party at his house. What is it? How does he not say it's at least my show? And, okay, so I'm shocked reading the book, and then the publicist calls and wants him to come on and do an interview to promote his book. I'm like, oh yeah, you have that guy come on right now. Let's get him on here. So as soon as he says, before we even start talking, he goes, dude, I can explain. Because, and I just, I was dumbfounded at what the logic would be, because later on in the book, he does mention me by name, because I love the album Subhuman Race. Mm-hmm. And he wrote something like, most people hate that record, but Eddie Trunk likes it. But he mentioned me by name. I'm like, I don't get what's going on here. So to his credit, he came clean about why he left my name out. And it is the dumbest thing, but it's classic Sebastian. He ran out and bought my book, which I appreciate, the day this came out. And in that book, if you have either of my books, you will notice that in every section, the discographies do not list any offshoots. So if the chapter is on Kiss, there's nothing about Paul, Gene, Ace solo records in the discography. It's Kiss. Anything that came out, that's the discography. Aerosmith, there's no Whitford St. Holmes, there's no Joe Perry project. It's just stuff that came out under the name Aerosmith. Consistently in both books. So he went and got the book and went flash forwarding to the Skid Row section, which there is one in here. And here he goes.
Hey, you did that quick.
Yeah. So he goes to the Skid Row section, and here's the discography. And it lists, again, consistently, anything that came out under the name Skid Row. He went crazy because he didn't list his solo records. Now, again, that's not exclusive. That's every single chapter doesn't list anyone's solo records. He was so angry that at the time he was writing that chapter in his book, he decided to penalize me by omitting my name from the story.
Yeah, you were a DJ at that point.
I'm just the DJ. So every time he calls me, I'm like, just call me the DJ, Eddie. The DJ, not even my name. I'm just the DJ. But again, it just was so. Baz is so passionate about the things he does that it just made me laugh, because it's just like, you know what, that's classic Sebastian. But I said to him, I go, did you look in the book and see that literally nobody solo things? Like, I could see if like it was a section on, like maybe if I do a third one of this type of book, I'll do it on his solo records. And then I'll list all of them. But it's not like it's an anomaly that I left your records out.
This stuff is gold too, because I love going back and listening to it. It's just classic stuff.
I give him credit for coming clean as to why, because it dumbfounded me, and he's just like, okay, dude, this is going to sound really stupid. This is going to be awkward. He said it on the air. He's like, but here's what was going on at the time. And I was just like, oh, that is great. I got a kick out of it. I thought it was funny.
So if you do a book, your next book, would you ever do an audible like he did? Because he reads his own book, Sebastian Bach, and I love it. And Scott does it too, reads his own. Would you do something like that?
Yeah, the reason why I didn't do an audiobook on either of these books is because these books are 50-50 photos and text.
Yeah.
And it's kind of would be redundant, not redundant, but it kind of wouldn't make sense that a book that's so photo heavy to do audio on. The book that I'm going to work on and eventually one day put out, which is my story, 35 years in the business, that will be 95% text, and I'll certainly do audio on that. Oh, the story of these books is interesting because the publisher I did these books with, they generally don't do books with even this much text. Mm-hmm. They're known for photo books.
Are they more like coffee books?
Yeah. And then this was a bit of an experiment that went really well for them, which is why I did the second one, and which is why there's no audio. But the publisher on these books is a company called Abrams, and they're way known for coffee table photo-driven books. And then when they realized the fan following that I had and how good the first one did, they wanted to do a second.
Was it hard finding like ticket stubs and all that? Because you had some...
No, that sort of stuff is truly all my stuff in my collection. So I have like a bunch of boxes, and I just turned it all over to the publisher, and I'm like, scan what you want, give back to me when you're done. All the photos in the first book and most of them in the second were all done by a lifelong friend to this day that's been going to shows with and been following me around. This cover photo on this.
Yeah, what's that from?
This is L'Amour's in Brooklyn, and I'm introducing Anthrax, and this would be probably around '86. And there's another version of this where I'm actually in this shot. Oh, like I'm here. Like if you could see, this is me introducing them, but the camera's like just in front of me, if you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. But this reaction is happening because, and I've actually heard from some people who found themselves in this photo.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but this is '86 at L'Amour's in Brooklyn, which was a legendary rock club.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So going to Trunk Fest, you're about almost finished, right? You got one more episode, you said?
Yeah, one more to shoot. I mean, by the time people see this, it'll be shot. And we're right in the middle of the season airing, with the 4th episode is about to air.
So, and you said you're going to work on maybe a season 2, possibly?
Yes.
Yeah. And that usually takes a while, though, doing this. So if you did a season 2, would this come out about this time next year, or would this?
Haven't figured that out yet. We're trying to figure that out because doing a TV show about music festivals, it has to be shot at the time when music festivals are happening, which now they're pretty much happening year-round in parts of the country. But you can't, the way we did that metal show is like, okay, we went to New York or we went to LA, we set up for a week, we knocked them all out, and that was it. Can't do that because obviously you've got to do festivals in real time when they happen. So I'm waiting to see how the network wants to handle that. Where we sit now, July 2018, as we're doing this, the first episode that aired of Trunk Fest was from August of 2017, which was Sturgis last year. Sturgis this year is about to happen. So there is some time that they sit on the shelf a little bit, but they're not dated in any way. It's just still what happened at the festival that year. And I don't know how they want to do it. I'm going to talk to my producers, and we're going to next week have some meetings and see how they want to tackle doing another season of it. But yeah, I'm excited to know that we will be doing more.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you want to add? Well, what's going on now?
No, man. I mean, I'm lucky that I'm getting to do all this great stuff. I mean, at at 53 and after 35 years, it's like to be able to still have all these opportunities has been awesome. And I'm about to like just crazy stuff's going on. I think it all comes with the fact that I've done this so long, so consistently, and one shoe drops and I'll go pick up something else. And just, I've always been a hustler in that way and always tried to do the best I can. But there's just really cool opportunities that have come up. Like in November, I'm going to be doing a tour of Mexico with Deep Purple.
Yeah. Okay.
Where I'm actually going to travel with them and actually do my radio show from there. So stuff like that. There's a Sirius XM tour, a Hair Nation tour going out that I'm going to do 7 stops on. There's tons of hosting opportunities and appearances. It's kind of surreal for me because having done this for so long, I built such a great rapport and built such a great audience that actually cares about what I do, and I'm so grateful for that. So to be able to continue to just make a living at what I love doing has just been an amazing blessing. And I was kind of, I'll be honest with you, when that metal show went away, I was like, okay, well, maybe things are going to really slow down a little bit here. But it's actually gone the opposite way. I think that still a lot of people that miss that show. I miss it. I'll do it again tomorrow if there's a network that wants to air it. But in the meantime, I mean, there are some people that only know me from that metal show, and they're like, what the hell are you doing the last few years?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm doing right now is 6 live shows a week on Sirius XM, 2 on Mondays, one every day, weekday, a podcast, a terrestrial show that's on in 30 cities right now, trying to finish off the 3rd book, and shooting this TV show for Access, and tons of like concerts and hosting stuff. So I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that because I find that in talking to people, there's people that connect with me. They only know me from radio. They only know me from a TV show. They only know me from a podcast. There's some people that know all the things I do, and I appreciate it no matter what. But there are a lot of different things to do out there, and I'm having a blast doing them all, and I'm so lucky to be able to do them. And the one thing I would say to people, because I am asked about it all the time about that metal show, and I appreciate people asking about it and missing it and wanting it back. And I say to them the same thing that I've said consistently: nobody misses it more than me. You know, it was my baby. I would love for it to come back. Myself, Don, and Jim, we're still friends. We still talk. We still hang out when we can. But when it ended, you can't just sit there and cry over something that you had no control over. The show didn't end. The network went off the air. That's why the show classic, ended. Right? Yeah. That, by the way, if you got the time, that's a story a lot of people don't know. We were told that the show was going to continue. We were told while we were doing the last season that VH1 Classic was going off the air and changing to MTV Classic. They told us everything that was going to happen. But the one thing they told us that turned out not to be true was that they would not, they meaning Viacom, the parent company, would not discontinue the show. They told us they were going to move the show to either regular VH1, to Comedy Central, all of their networks they owned. So we knew when we shot the last season that the network was going away. But our mentality was, it's going to be a positive, because now maybe we're going to go to a channel broadcast in HD, more resources, and have all these things that we never had, because that's what they told us. Season ends, channel does go away, and then they decide, then all the executives leave or get canned, and then they decide, nah, we just aren't going to do this anymore.
Wow.
So it wasn't like I'm not saying that it was some sort of diabolical thing the way they did it. They didn't know that's how it was going to play out. Because a lot of the people telling us that they would move us to another network once the channel went away either took other jobs or quit or got fired.
I'm shocked they did that though, you know? Because how many people are going to forget about MTV Classic if they don't have a show you can go to? I mean, it's...
See, that's just it. And that's like a whole bigger thing, because VH1 Classic... It was a struggle every year with that show because we were the only original show produced for that channel, for the most part. So we were on a channel. So many times people would say, oh, you're on VH1. No, we weren't. We're on VH1 Classic, and that is a huge difference. That's the difference between a company that has budget this big to work on VH1 and this big to work on VH1 Classic. And it was a struggle because we became the reason why people watched the channel, but the channel was never set up to support an original produced show. So it was this push-pull. There was one year we only did 8 shows the whole year. And it was very, very difficult to keep it on track because we didn't have a network that was basically set up to produce original programming. And that's why when they changed it to MTV Classic, there's nothing original. It's just, that's what VH1 Classic was supposed to be. But then they took this chance and put this show on, and then it became way more popular than anyone thought. And it was like a catch-22 because they couldn't get rid of it because they knew it's the reason why people watched the channel, but they couldn't really support it the right way they wanted to. So that was the story of that show every step of the way. And I'm not complaining. I mean, I had great people that I worked with there, and I had great relationships there, and great friendships and all that. And the crew and the people there did great with what we could work with. But for me, as somebody on the inside of that metal show, the thing that I will forever think about is what could have been with that show.
Yeah.
If we had a network that really went for it and really tried to, because we were going to go in a direction, we were going to get broader, we were going to bring in wider range of guests, all these things.
We're going to do like live acts, like where you have a band
performance.
Play. Right.
Because the reason why none of those guitar players ever played even a riff is because we wouldn't pay the publishing.
My favorite story about that is when Zakk Wylde came out and you guys did, you wanted to do Happy Birthday, but it cost too much.
Yeah, so we did it in Spanish because it was cheaper to get it cleared in Spanish for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Crazy stories like that. Like we did all these little end rounds, and we would hear from people all the time, like, how is it not in HD? When we were a half an hour, they would be like, how come it's not an hour? How come the bands there's not performances? How come there's not more shows? How come there's not online? How come?
Yeah,
got nothing to do with
and
it.
You're the go-to guy.
Yeah, it's all going to come at me. I get it, but it's like it's not. I have all the same frustrations. So the thing that I will forever think about with that metal show, and the thing I think about if we could ever find somebody who wanted to do it again, is where we could go the next step with it, like where we were headed. That's the only thing that really kills me too about it ending was where we were headed. If we could have made that jump to Comedy Central, True TV, I don't care what the channel was, anyone that could have taken it and saw the value in it and said, okay, we're going to raise the stakes here. We're going to clear publishing. We're going to send you guys out more. We're going to do this. Sky would have been the limit.
Yeah.
But we got pulled out just before. The network was either at a point where they were either going to get all in and put money in and really become a legit real network, or go the other way and basically just become a hub to run old stuff. And as you see, if you watch MTV Classic, which is what VH1 Classic became, that's the direction they took.
Yeah.
It's the hub to just run old stuff.
Well, as a fan, I love listening to you on the radio, podcasting, and I just want to say thank you for that. I mean, it's that free service of just podcasting. I mean, you don't have to do that. I mean, I can just download an app and listen to you talk about music and interviews and stuff. So I really appreciate that. It's really awesome.
Thanks, man. The podcast has become sort of, the interviews in it are just basically, I just basically take one interview from my daily show on Sirius XM and I post that as a podcast. And that's for two reasons. For people that don't have Sirius or XM, maybe it inspires them to get it, or you can only get Sirius XM in US and Canada. The podcast is obviously global, so people can hear no matter where they are in the world. But and I'll tell you the one thing, just to let people know too, speaking of Sirius XM, in the last year and a half, 2 years, it has been an absolute joy and blessing to have this channel volume that I'm on right now.
I love it. Yeah.
And to be able to do this show, for people that don't know, I'm on every day from 2 to 4 Eastern time live, talking about rock music with an audience. I very much structure that show to be like sports talk for rock fans.
Yeah.
I want it to be a two-way street. I love the back and forth with the audience. I have a ton of great guests. I'm about to, can't announce it here because it's not going to be announced till next week, but there's going to be a special monthly thing I'm going to be doing with that show. So to do that, and then that show replays and it goes on the app, so it has a little bit longer of a life. But to have a platform now every day to talk with fans about rock music and artists has been amazing. It's so right up my world that it's been awesome. So for people that have Sirius or XM, please check it out on 106. Not only just my show, but the whole channel is all talk about music, all genres of music. I do all rock, but it's really been a really cool thing and a great natural extension to what I do anyway.
I love the phone app too. So if you miss it, you can. I mean, if you're working, you can listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on live 2 to 4, and I realize there's a lot of people that listen to it on the replay or on the app because of those hours that can't call. So lately I've been doing a lot of interactivity with talking to people and answering emails from people, because I hear from people all the time. It's like, I listen, I can't call, or it's in my workday, I listen to the replay, I want to ask you about this. So that's another way that I can connect with them. But it's been a blast doing volume, and I'm really lucky that came along, because that came on right off the heels of that metal show. So even as far as a full-time gig and really something to sink into, that was great timing for me.
It is. Yeah. Well, thank you, Eddie,
Scott,
for being here.
Pleasure, man. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.